Rene, can you tell me about the Four Horsemen and what that means?
Well, the Four Horsemen are 4 individuals from Pelican Bay State Prison who are actually running a de facto commission. They've been dubbed the Four Horsemen by the SSU, the Special Services Unit, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I strongly believe that the Mexican Mafia members themselves do not refer to themselves as the Four Horsemen. If anything, they call themselves a Mesa. But I think it's a tentative Mesa and not an official Mesa just yet. But the Four Horsemen are 4 well-respected, highly placed individuals in the organization. One is Jimmy Sanchez. The other is Danny Peña. Another is Gabriel Huerta. And the 4th is George Gonzalez. With the death of Jimmy Sanchez, that leaves a void in this commission. Whether it is an actual commission yet or not is still to be proven. But there's always been a group of individuals within the California faction, because the California faction is egalitarian. It means that all cardenales are considered equal, unlike the feds. The feds have a bona fide commission that's recognized by the entire organization. California has always been egalitarian and resistant to a leadership structure. But the more advanced and progressive thinkers in the organization have pushed for a commission, and in fact George Gonzalez once sat on the commission in 1988. In 1985 Folsom was there. He was one of the 4 commissioners on the yard. So it stands the possibility that these individuals are acting as some of the heads of the organization in Pelican Bay State Prison. I would have thought that at least a couple of older cardenales like Roland Berry, Donaldo Galas, Stoney from Rancho San Pedro, or Chavo from Bakers would be on that commission. In fact, they 1 or more individuals that are older and influential in the organization may take Jimmy Sanchez's place, but this is something that recently came out within the past year. Again, it's still unsubstantiated. There was communications intercepted by the Special Services Unit, which I was privy to, that indicated that the Sureños on all general population yards in the state of California are referring to the Four Horsemen, who have been identified as these 4 individuals that I mentioned.
So can you tell me exactly what the Mesa is, the definition?
The Mesa, the literal definition of a Mesa is table. It's a phrase we utilize as a commission. There's a variety of different mesas. The Mesa for the Mexican Mafia is the commission. There is a Mesa in Arizona, which is headed by Pete Moreno. There's a Mesa in the Feds, which is headed by Champ Reynoso. And there are multiple Mesas on prison general population yards. And the Mesas in general population yards are comprised of Sureños who work at the behest of Cardenales, main members. And what it's done, it's by collective decision. They actually run the yard by collective decision. No longer is there a llavero. There's not one individual who controls the yard. That creates too much chaos and abuse of power. So the Mexican Mafia wanted to distribute the power and continue business. In the event that 1 or more meseros were taken to administrative segregation, they would establish a second-tier leadership, and quite possibly at least 1 mesero would survive the sweep on the yard. So this is why the Mesa system was created. This is one of the reasons why it was created. But Mesas for Sureños are groups of individuals who make decisions for Sureños in general population settings.
Great. Thank you very much, Rene.
You're welcome.
Rene, what advice do you have for anybody who's new coming into the prison system as a correctional officer but has no prior experience in a correctional environment?
I would number 1 advise them to be aware of their surroundings, because it's BOP, because it's a lax security, because it's not as intense as CDCR, because you don't experience the violence that Sureños perpetrate on prison yards and general population settings in California prisons. I would advise them to be aware that they are dealing with the infrastructure of the Mexican Mafia every day that they're on that yard. Sureños, gang members from Los Angeles, gang members from Southern California, gang members from a variety of different locations are associates and affiliates of the Mexican Mafia. And the clear difference between the BOP and California Department of Corrections is that the BOP actually allows Mexican Mafias to be on that main line, on the general population setting. which actually increases the power of Surenos through having direct communication with the hierarchy. So you have a better organized, in some cases more stable, but potentially more volatile, more threat to the officer. I mean, you have direct leadership in association with Surenos in the general population setting every day. They have access to telephones, they have access to visitation, they have access to open communication. So for the new cadet, for the new officer, for the new BOP correctional officer, for staff members that are exposed to these individuals, understand that because the standard operating procedure has been hands-off on cops doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. There are individuals in the custody of the BOP who are extremely volatile, Mexican Mafia members that I dealt with in the past. Raul Leon is one of them. And if he had his way, cops would get hit. There are other Mexican Mafia members there that I know are extremely violent. I participated in violence with them. So just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it will not happen. I'm sure that there have been instances of violence with BOP staff among Mexican Mafia members and Surenos already. So I would say be aware, absorb as much training as possible, read on the topic. I mean, there's some good literature out there on the Mexican Mafia. And attend training. I mean, training is essential. Good training for staff is a must. This is one of the reasons I participate in these videos and do this, so that I can share the information with staff who have no prior experience with Mexican Mafia members. I realize that there's not a lot of formal training available to BOP, and it's one of the reasons why I agreed with you immediately to do it. And I'd say that absorb as much training as possible, either on your own research, because the internet is a wonderful resource. It's a wonderful resource. There's a ton of material. Some of it's inaccurate, but some of it's accurate. And simply be aware of your surroundings. It's prison. In prison, there are killers. Some of these individuals will never see the light of day again. So what's to stop them from killing again? Or what's to stop them from killing a BOP staff member or a correctional officer? Is it the privileges, the benefits? I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of time before the Mexican Mafia and Surenos do target staff members at some point, whether it be an isolated incident or an organized, concerted effort. It will happen. That's a certainty. The Mexican Mafia is about death. It's about violence, and the Surenos are part of its integral machinery. And they've learned through the Mexican Mafia members that violence works. It's a language that everybody understands. So why wouldn't they utilize it in the BOP if they use it in California so well? They hit staff or they kill cops on the streets. Surenos now kill cops and target cops as a regular practice. They tag it on the walls, 187 cops. Rest in piss for cops that have been murdered. It puts gangs on the map. Gangs become known as cop killers. And these are the very same Surenos that are being swept up into RICO indictments and thrust into the BOP system right now. The same individuals who have targeted cops and killed cops are now in your system. If they're done on the streets and they're done at the California Department of Corrections, why wouldn't they do it there? So I would say be aware and be wary.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Rene, can you tell me the difference in Sureno structure as far as on the streets and in prison?
Well, on the streets, Surenos have a variety of different positions that they can achieve. Number one, a Sureno, by definition, is an individual who identifies with the Southern California gang subculture, the ideology of the Southern California gang member, Hispanic gang member. That's a Sureno. Sureno defines anybody from Bakersfield or Delano on down to San Diego. But that in itself is a misnomer. It's a misidentification of Surenos, because Surenos are now nationwide and international due to deportation policies. So Surenos can be found in Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, El Salvador, even Canada. I mean, Surenos are global. But that's the reality of Sureno migration today. But the true definition of a Sureno is an individual from Southern California, an individual who hails from Southern California. On the streets, they have a specific structure. There's a Sureno, who is just an individual from the Southern California gang. They are camaradas. who are a notch above Sureños. These are individuals who put in work for the Mexican Mafia, who have long relationship with the organization and have proven themselves. They've been vetted by the organization, if you will. And there are crew chiefs. Let's just go by the street structure. Let's give you a synoptic version of what our pyramid scheme is. At the very top, there's a carnal. That's a Mexican Mafia member. Beneath him is a facilitator, typically a woman who aids and abets in his communication and his criminal enterprise in the streets. The facilitator communicates with the crew chief, who is a Sureno, typically a Sureno. But he's a higher level camarada, an individual extremely trusted by the senora, the facilitator, and the carnal. Beneath that crew chief is our crew leaders or reps. Reps are individuals who are appointed to different geographic locations. If I have a crew, say that me, Rene Enriquez, formerly boxer from the Mexican Mafia, I had a crew. I had reps from Pico Rivera, Norwalk, Artesia, Downey, Victorville, Lenox. I had reps in all these areas, and they answered to my crew chief. My crew chief conducted all communication with them. And beneath them were workers in gang territories. So it's very structured. And the structure is created to insulate the carnal from individuals rolling. But in the same token, it insulates the individuals who are working from the carnal rolling down on them. So it's a firewall. Only one person talks with the upper echelon. So to bring down the whole structure, even the crew chief can't bring down the workers because he doesn't communicate with them. Only the reps do. Only the reps can bring down the crew chief. And only the crew chief can bring down the facilitator. Only the facilitator can bring down the carnal. So it would take a complete breakdown of the whole structure to prosecute the whole crew. It's a great protection thing. But in jail, Sureños take on a different meaning. There's a street Sureno who is a soldier. I mean, I've heard them defined as soldiers for the Mexican Mafia, which is in part true. Sureños identify with the ideology of the Mexican Mafia. They surrender, in a sense, their autonomy to the organization. And they adopt this ideology of the warrior. They think that they are now soldiers for the organization. This doesn't encompass all Sureños, because the Mexican Mafia does not control Sureños. It controls the majority of Sureños, but it can be said for some of them. In jail, Sureños have a completely different structure. There are, again, Sureños. Beneath Sureños are residents. These are individuals who live from Southern California, who are not gang affiliated, but who follow the instructions of and support Sureños during a time of racial conflict or any type of conflict that the Sureños engage in. There are also paisas who toe the Sureno line. These are Mexican nationals. Above Sureños, there are camaradas. Again, camaradas are trusted individuals in the organization who have been vetted and proven, who have spilled blood, who have done wet work for the organization. I mean, a contemporary phrase is now camarada for all Sureños. He's a camarada, but traditionally camaradas were individuals who had a long-standing reputation with the organization. And among those individuals, they have a structure also. There are mesas, which I explained earlier. Mesas were created solely to reduce conflict among Sureños vying for positions of power on main lines through the llavero system. The llavero system is utilized where one camarada, one Sureno, wrote to a carnal and received permission to run the yard through that carnal. Unbeknownst to all these carnales that were writing multiple individuals in the same facilities, multiple individuals were receiving permission to run one facility, which created conflict. Through years of this and hundreds of Sureños being hit, stabbed, and ruined, a plan was devised through, again, Gabriel Huerta, George Gonzalez, Raúl León, to establish a Mesero system. And the Mesero system dispersed the power equally among 5 individuals on a yard, much like our Mexican Mafia Commission, our Mesa on the organization. And I refer to our as past tense, as I was a Mexican Mafia member. I don't think of myself now as a Mexican Mafia member. But Meseros control Sureños on general population yards. So there's a variety of different levels that Sureños can achieve. And the highest level a Sureno can achieve is that of carnal. But fewer than half of 1% of all Sureños in the California Department of Corrections, or BOP, will ever even be considered for membership. It's a very elitist group. So that's the ultimate goal for them, is to become a carnal. But Sureños hold these different positions. There's also esquinero. And let me give it to you in order so it doesn't sound chaotic. At the top there's the Mesa, which a Sureno can be a mesero, which means he's the head Sureno on the yard, one of the head Sureños on the yard. Beneath him can be a bloquero, which is an individual who runs a block. There can be also a pisero. A pisero is an individual who runs a floor. There can be a tier rep, an individual who runs a tier. There can be a cell rep, an individual who controls a cell. So there are a variety of different stations for individuals who are Sureños to achieve. So there is actually a status mobility system for these individuals. It's not just you're a Sureno and you're part of the Sureno nation. No, there is an upward and mobile system by which they can elevate their status, even if they don't become cardenales. Some Sureños hold an awesome amount of influence in that they run a prison, they have the ability to call hits, they have the ability to tax, they have the ability to distribute narcotics. They have secretaries that facilitate their efforts and conduct their criminal enterprises from telephones achieved through identity theft burnout lines. They're known as burnout lines. So Sureños have a variety of different ways, and there's a variety of different elevation statuses for them.
Great. Thank you very much, Rene.
You're welcome.